Hello, good evening, and welcome to our live development stream for November 2021. I'd like to first of all welcome all of our patrons and everybody else who's watching. Today we'll be talking about Presetto, which is our plugin of the month for this month, and it is based on second unit, which we released last month. I think just to recap, let's see if I can find that scene. There we go. So what we did last month is we created a plugin called Second Unit. That's a master plugin. And what it allows you to do is store various settings per camera that are normally global in a scene, such as in this case the background. So if you switch from one camera to another, it will actually load a different background, for example, or change the render range. And yeah, basically there's various settings here that will be stored. They're saved in the scene. They're stored per camera. In this case, or so far, it's the render range, so the start and end frame, as well as the render step. The preview range, which is the range that you see down here in the timeline. The background, the limited region settings, and the buffer settings that you have in the render panel over here. Those settings per buffer, these can be stored per camera as well. So what that basically did is, or what basically happened is that I had to write code to store and retrieve all of those settings, save them, load them. And one of the consequences of that was that there was the idea, well, why not reuse the same code and use it to actually create presets? So what we have now is we have a generic plugin called Presetto, which was originally called Presetter, but I think Presetto is a bit cuter, and it's also a take on Ristretto, which is like a small but very strong coffee. And this is Presetto, and you will see that it's got the same 5 things to store and retrieve, but in this case, they're presets. So if, for example, you like the background of this camera, you can save it as a preset, give it a name, and then maybe switch to a different camera. Let's take this one, and let's hope this works, and then you retrieve the preset. There you go, and now the preset is applied to this camera. Now these aren't live presets, so this is like loading in the settings. And you can do the same with limited region, and one of the advantages of having presets as opposed to per camera settings is that you could actually use them in another scene. So if you use a limited region and you want to copy it from one scene to another, or a certain background or preview range, etc., you can store it as a preset here and then restore it somewhere else. And hello, Andrew, in the chat. So yeah, this is what Presetto does. The two things I had to do was essentially take the individual code for saving and restoring that and put that into like a separate code file, and then write a plugin that actually handles all of this, but most of this is very automated. What is going to happen is there's going to be new types of settings that will be stored and saved. And one thing I'm also thinking about is maybe expand a little bit here. So for example, if you have items in your scene and you have certain render styles for the viewport, like having them only render as wireframe with a certain color, then being able to save that as a preset and then going to another scene or selecting other items and multiple items and applying that preset to those items might be extremely useful as well. Hello, Sakutsu. So yeah, what we depend on here, because this is certainly not enough to make this a very interesting product, is we need your feedback to see if there's anything else you'd like to see in there. Um, what kind of settings you would like to actually be able to save as a preset. I mean, for example, the buffer setting here, that's kind of makes sense for per camera settings, but you do have presets here as well, so there isn't that much of a reason to actually offer the buffer settings in Presetto also, but I've got the code, so I might as well do it. Now, the presets themselves are created or managed by the preset system that all of our plugins use. In the wiki, there is a section right at the bottom, Common Concepts Preset System, and that explains how it works, where it stores the data, and also how you can extend it. If you look at the, let's just save as preset, you have three different types here at the moment. One is content, which is saving the preset in your content directory. Global is a location that any user account on that current machine can access. And user is just in your local user account. And you can actually extend this list with custom paths. So for example, if you're working on a team and you would like a certain location on your network where you store presets, then you can use custom directories for presets. So you basically create a text file and put it in a certain location, and then it will provide you with more options here, and you can define which directories those options point to. Yeah, that would be almost like a meta preset. Andrew is asking, would like the ability to make a whole default setup which can be easily loaded, so camera settings, background environment, lights, samples, and so on. What the presets don't do is that they don't actually create items. So it's just applying settings to something. Actually adding items or something like that would be trickier, and I think in that case you're probably better off if you actually create a default W LVS scene that is being loaded automatically by Lightwave. And also the render settings, I'm not sure. I think, no, these don't have a preset. I'll certainly need to add those. But I think the camera settings, yeah, that could be tricky. Sampling shouldn't be a problem. All of this shouldn't be a problem, but even the camera type and the settings for that camera type would already be tricky. Well, not for the perspective camera, but for the other ones. So I'll have to look into that, if I can actually find out which plugin is attached to which camera and if I can save the settings or not. But yeah, that makes sense for the presets, but doesn't really make sense for the per camera settings, obviously, because the per camera already has the camera settings. Yeah, but if you want to change it and not have an environment light, for example, then would have to delete or add something. And if you just want certain settings for your camera and everything that you want as a default, yeah, default WLVS I think is the better option here and the easier option as well. Because, for example, if I add the ability to, I don't have an item in here, do I? Let's just add this one. There we go. For example, all of this or most of this could be saved as a preset for an item and then applied to multiple items again. But if an item doesn't exist, it wouldn't create any. It would just apply those settings. Hello, Kevin. Good morning to you. Good evening for us. So yeah, um, that's the current state. This actually works. Um, One thing I certainly wanted to do is change the user interface a little bit because there's plenty of wasted space. And since Dagmar really likes me writing code live, that's what I'm going to do for at least one of the controls at the moment. And it should be fairly easy to do. So let's just exit the scene. And I do actually have the compiler here. And this is essentially the whole source code for Presetto. And as you can see, there isn't that much really. That's fairly short. That's like 135 lines. But on the left, you see all the settings store, and that's 408 lines. And that is going to expand as more types of settings are being added. So let's see. I want the render range just to shift to the left. So in the X panels that we're using at the moment, you have a section where you define what kind of controls you would like to have. These are all the presets, so these are pop-ups. And then later on, you have the option to actually change the layout. And this should actually work. Let's just try it. Compiling. There we go. And yeah, sorry, it switched desktops. Let me just move that back to where it belongs. Belongs here. There we go. All right. Yep, and as you can see, the render range has now moved to the left, which makes the whole thing a bit more compact, and especially when later on there's going to be presets that can be applied per item. It makes sense to actually group them, maybe add a divider or something, and if it's way too many, which I doubt, maybe even add tabs or something. So you have global settings like these, then you will have per item settings, and so on. One thing I would have liked to do, but that don't think is actually possible here, is have an option where it would automatically close the window once you perform an action here. So the idea would be that you use a shortcut assigned to Presetto. It opens the user interface, you do something, and bam, afterwards it automatically closes it again, which is a bit how Quick Pick works, where they don't have installed on this. I don't actually know. But you basically use a shortcut, open the panel, do something on the panel, and you don't have to close it. It's automatically gone, and you don't have to worry about it, cluttering your workspace. On the other hand, you can always keep this open, tuck it away somewhere, keep on working. This runs as a non-modal window, so it doesn't interfere with anything. And whenever you need to use a preset, you just use it in the window, whatever else you do. Also, this doesn't change anything, or it doesn't save any settings with the scene. It just applies settings from the presets to the scene, and but there is no Presetto plugin that is being added to the scene itself. It's just you open it, it runs, you close it, it's gone. So yeah, that's basically the current state. What I'm going to do is I shall tweak the user interface a bit. Probably send you a copy tomorrow. I've already compiled a version on the Mac today just to see if that works. And then next week I'll start adding more options, which will also, and that's the interesting thing about this, if we find that there's useful presets in here that we would like to have per camera as well, then adding any of them to second unit is basically, handful of lines of code, maybe 5 or 6 lines, and vice versa. But I can control the what is being shown in either of them independently of each other. If you look at the code here, what I basically do per preset is I have a list of possible presets. The list is called settings, and in each one, basically one after the other, I add a setting. This is the type of setting to add. This is the name for loading and saving. And over here, I add the user interface buttons. And here I do some formatting of the user interface buttons. And that's basically all I need to change to add new presets. So I add a new line here, add a new button here, maybe add some more formatting here. For example, move the limited region button to the right. And yeah, then that's it. That's all that needs to be done. And of course, for every preset, I need to add a class here. And I think I explained that the last time. How these work is basically I call them settings store, has a function that you can call where it stores the current settings. In this case, it's getting the start and end frames, the render frames, the render range, and it stores them into local variables. Then you can restore them, which it does by issuing commands to Lightwave. And those can also be loaded and saved because second unit had to load and save them with the scene. So it could load them, obviously, once you load the scene back and you switch the cameras. And Presetto is using the exact same load and save routines, except that this time it's using them to load and save presets. And yeah, if you look at how Presetto is using this, is basically when it loads a preset, it loads whatever is on the disk into the settings store, and then it just tells it to restore those settings. And when you save a preset, what it does is it stores the current settings in layout in the settings store, and then it saves it. So it's using the same code, just in a slightly different fashion. And yeah, that's currently all there is to talk about, really. I don't have anything else to show. But yeah, reading through that preset system, if you want to use this in a more complicated environment, is certainly helpful. And the nice thing is, if you actually add a new path for the preset system, that this is also going to be used by all of our plugins that use that preset system, which includes a couple of the plugins in the db&w tools, but also XR Trader, NodeMeister, and so on. It's the same system throughout. And the reason why there's a custom system and we're not using the one that's built into Lightwave is because back in the days when we started this, you couldn't do things like add specific paths or even separate between like global, local paths, content only paths. And I thought that was quite important if you work with multiple projects or with multiple people on the same projects that you might want to separate that. Yeah, and we also have some in progress documentation, which is just a screenshot and 2 lines of descriptive text at the moment. But yeah, we're getting there. So yeah, that's the current state. Are there any questions? Because if there aren't, we're going to make this super quick today. um, so yeah, what we certainly need from you, and thank you, Andrew, for your suggestions, but that's going a bit too far. Yeah, sure, Kevin, go ahead. Non-Presetto question is perfectly fine as well. So yeah, what we certainly need from you is suggestions on which settings you would like to have us be able to save as presets, apply as presets, where it makes sense for you, where it doesn't, or what kind of problem you would like to solve. Um, Also, if you're not on our Discord yet, um, please join us there, especially as a patron. Um, you will. Oh yes, yes, Kevin. Kevin asked on Discord. He had a spline question, and let me just double check. Um, I haven't looked at the second part of it yet. I will though. Um, I'll have a look at that. It's a bit tricky to wrap my head around. If possible, because I do have your original scene, if I remember correctly. Um, if you have another scene for me to look at, that would help. But yeah, I'll need to look at it. Haven't done that. Sorry for that. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Um, Either that or have a start and end position for the deformation. Actually, or just a start position for the deformation. That might help as well. So you could basically slide let's say a tube along a spline without changing the length of the tube. And if you just change the start position, then it would just shift it along the spline, which is what I think you're trying to achieve there. Um, that might be a better and probably also more intuitive way to do what you're trying to do. Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be instances in this case. Kevin asks if it's possible to use that same spline to create instances so you could have an array of streaks offset from the master spline. Um, Not proper instances, because instances in the sense of the way Lightwave or anything really treats them as an instance is a copy of a mesh as is, including all deformations. Um, so an, a mesh that's instanced cannot have different deformations on different instanced copies. What you would need to do is clone the object, but you could have it on the same or be affected by the same spline. And if there was like a starting offset, then each one of those could have a different offset, and that should work. So yeah, I'm going to look at that. Maybe tomorrow. I'll look at it tomorrow, and I'll see if I can actually add a start offset or something, and see if that might help. Wait, there is an offset distance already. I mean, that should already do the trick. But I'll see if I can replicate your scene, or maybe you can send me one, and I'll take a look at it. Because if I remember correctly, the offset distance should actually do what you want it to do. So yeah, that's my thinking aloud. I mean, the problem is I haven't really looked at the spline tools for quite some time yet, which means that I'm not even 100% sure of what they can do and can't do, or whatever, what I developed back then. It's been a while. And apparently that's not really uncommon. I think at one point in time I asked one of the developers how to code something. I think that was for the spline tools actually, how to code something that shows up down here in the like upper part of the timeline, where IK Booster sometimes shows some stuff. And I wanted to add something there. I think it was um, for the spline edit tool. And he just wrote back, and the developer said, yeah, I wrote that like 15 years ago and I haven't touched it since, so I'm not sure how it works. And sometimes you feel the same way if it's just something that you've written a year ago. But then again, I did get back into it for another issue that cropped up lately. So yeah, shouldn't be too bad. I'll take a gander, and I actually do think that the offset distance actually does what you wanted to do, though, at least in your case. So yeah, um, thanks to all of you for joining us, for listening in, for watching. If you're a patron, thank you very much for supporting us. You're great. Thanks for asking questions. Thanks for pushing us. Thanks for posting suggestions, even if we can't fill any of them, all of them. And yeah, thank you very much. If you're not a patron, why not? Links are in the description below. And yes, please send us suggestions for the presets, even either on Discord, or you can also leave comments on the Patreon site. on the announcement or wherever you want to, or the poll. And yeah, you can expect a build tomorrow, and I'll also look at the spline tools issue, see if that really is one, or if I'm completely mistaken about what I wrote, or if it's just a workflow issue. So thanks a lot. Have a nice evening. Kevin, have a nice remaining breakfast. Thanks for joining, and bye bye. Take care and stay safe.